I wasn't supposed to be home early that day. My last meeting got canceled on short notice, which felt like a gift after a long week of client calls and bad coffee. It was one of those rare, quiet Fridays where I could actually hear myself think. So I figured, what the hell, maybe I'd surprise Melissa. Pick up Ty from that place she loves. Maybe even light a candle or two like we used to. We'd been off lately, and I guess I thought a small gesture might help steer us back. Her car was in the driveway when I pulled in. Nothing unusual. But there was another car parked half a block down, a gray Honda Civic with tinted windows. No big deal, I told myself. Probably one of the neighbors. Still, something about the way it was half in the red, like whoever parked it was in a hurry, caught my eye. When I stepped onto the porch, I heard her laugh through the front window. Not her casual laugh, not the one I hear when she's watching TV or talking to her sister. It was that bright, airy kind of laugh she used at parties, the one that sounds like a performance. I paused, hand on the doorknob, as a man's voice floated through the glass. Calm, confident, low? I didn't recognize it right away. The lock clicked louder than usual when I turned the key. Inside, the living room smelled like red wine and expensive cologne. Melissa was perched on the arm of the couch, holding a half-full glass, her legs crossed a little too tightly. And there he was, Tom. Tom, the coworker she'd mentioned in passing once or twice. The one from her product team who, according to her, talked too much and had a weird mustache. Funny how now that mustache was gone and he was here, in our house, with a bottle of red uncorked on the table and a second glass, still warm from recent use, sitting beside his. Hey! Melissa jumped up, clearly not expecting me. You're back early. Meeting got canceled, I said, eyeing the room. Tom smiled, all confident like he belonged there. Just dropping off a report, he said, lifting his glass like we were old buddies. Didn't mean to intrude. Melissa jumped in quickly. Yeah, I asked him to go over some numbers. You know how this rollout has been stressing everyone out. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband making a scene in his own living room. So I offered Tom a tight smile and leaned against the wall, trying to ignore the way Melissa stood just a bit too close to him. A few minutes later, he made an exit. Melissa didn't walk him to the door. She just stood there, watching me, arms crossed like she was waiting for me to start something. I didn't. Instead, I grabbed the food I'd picked up and headed into the kitchen. You should have texted, she said, following me. I would have waited to eat. I didn't respond right away. I just unpacked the takeout, laid it out on the counter like it mattered. That's when I noticed it right by the couch, almost camouflaged against the rug, an earring. I picked it up. Teardrop-shaped. Emerald. A subtle shimmer in the light. Not flashy, but distinct. I knew every piece of jewelry Melissa owned. I'd bought most of it. And this? This wasn't hers. Is this yours? I asked, turning it in my fingers. She barely glanced. No idea. Probably from one of our get-togethers. You know how those girls get after 2 glasses of sangria. I nodded slowly. But the last time we'd had anyone over was her birthday 6 months ago. And even then it had been mostly couples. Her friends had worn yoga pants and hoodies. No emerald earrings. Melissa walked over, plucked it from my hand, and dropped it into the junk drawer with loose batteries and rubber bands like it was just another lost item in a house full of clutter. Don't be weird about it, she said, then turned to start washing dishes that didn't need washing. Tom barely stayed an hour. I didn't press. I didn't accuse. I just stood there, watching the way her shoulders tensed as she scrubbed the same plate 3 times. She was doing the thing where she got extra busy, extra distracted, like if she kept her hands moving, I wouldn't ask the questions already forming in my head. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But something about the way she avoided my eyes, how her voice got sharper when I asked simple questions, it didn't sit right. Later that night, we watched TV like usual. She curled up on the opposite end of the couch, phone in hand, always face down when she set it on the armrest. Every so often, it would light up with a buzz. Once, I caught a glimpse of the name T before she locked the screen and turned to me with that same too casual smile. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, she said. Just work. She leaned her head on my shoulder after that, like she was trying to close some invisible gap. But I felt it anyway, the space between us widening by the second. When she fell asleep, I sat there in the dark, the glow of the TV flickering across her face. My eyes kept drifting to the junk drawer. I imagined the earring buried under old receipts and half-dead pens waiting like a splinter under the skin. It was such a small thing. A trinket, really. But it felt like a message. A crack in the glass. The next morning, Melissa was already dressed when I woke up. She said she had an early meeting, something last minute. She kissed me on the forehead, not the lips, and her perfume lingered longer than it used to. When she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the door. The earring was still in the drawer, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. After the earring, things didn't unravel all at once. That would have been easier, maybe? Cleaner. But no, it was slower than that. Like a leak behind the walls, quietly rotting the structure while everything on the surface stayed picture perfect. Or at least, good enough to pass. The days that followed felt foggy. I was living the same routine, get up, shower, coffee, work, but something had shifted. Melissa didn't bring up the earring again, and I didn't push. I kept telling myself I was being dramatic, that I was tired, that I had trust issues I needed to work through. But once the seed is planted, you start noticing the weeds. I started remembering things I'd brushed off, like how she always set her phone face down on the table. I hadn't thought much of it before. Lots of people do that. But now it felt intentional. Like whatever was on that screen wasn't meant for me. Then there were the showers. She used to take quick ones, 5 or 10 minutes tops. But lately, they'd stretched out 20, sometimes 30 minutes with music blasting so loud I couldn't hear myself think. I'd knock on the door sometimes, just to grab my toothbrush or ask a quick question. And her voice would come back sharp, almost annoyed. Give me a second. Like I'd interrupted something sacred. And maybe I had. One Tuesday night, I made reservations at a steakhouse we both loved. It was nothing fancy, just something to break us out of the rut. When I told her, she hesitated. I totally forgot, she said, chewing her lip. Tom asked me to help him finalize the quarterly budget report. We have a deadline. That name again. Can't you do it tomorrow? She shook her head. He's leaving for a conference in the morning. Right? I ate alone that night. Told myself she was working hard. Being responsible. But then she posted an Instagram story from a bar, some speakeasy downtown. Neon lights, craft cocktails, and a close-up of a drink I knew she didn't like. Whiskey sour. Tom's favorite, she'd once said, laughing over happy hour stories. I didn't say anything when she got home. I just asked, get a lot done? She blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. Long night. Tom's a mess with spreadsheets. I nodded. The next morning, I scrolled through her Instagram again. The story was gone. 24 hours and it vanished like it never happened. But I'd seen it. I even took a screenshot, then deleted it later, feeling like a lunatic. Zach, my best friend since high school, pulled me aside one weekend. We were at his place for a cookout. Melissa had stayed behind, said she had a migraine. You okay, man? He asked when we stepped away from the group. You've been? I don't know. Different. I shrugged. Just work stress. He hesitated. Then, lowering his voice, said, you ever feel like you're not really in your relationship? Like you're just background? It hit me harder than I expected. I looked at him for a long second. What makes you say that? He shrugged. I don't know. Just an observation. You talk about Melissa like she's over there somewhere. Not next to you. I didn't respond. But I thought about it the whole drive home. Was I background in her life? I thought back to our anniversary the month before. I'd made dinner reservations, bought her the pendant she'd mentioned in passing. She forgot. Walked in with takeout and said, this is even cozier, right? Like it didn't matter. Maybe it didn't to her. The thing is, Melissa was always good at making it seem like nothing was wrong. She could carry a conversation like a pro, keep eye contact, laugh at the right moments. But there was a distance now. Not just physical, something colder. Like she was performing affection instead of feeling it. She used to ask about my day, what I was reading, what I was thinking about. Lately, she asked if I'd taken out the trash. It felt transactional. I started noticing how she'd get annoyed at small things. If I left a dish in the sink. If I forgot to pick up almond milk instead of regular. Once she snapped at me for misplacing the remote. Not screamed, just sighed in that way that makes you feel like a child who disappointed the teacher. One night, I asked if she wanted to go for a walk. It used to be our thing, late evening walks through the neighborhood. We'd hold hands, talk about nothing. She looked up from her phone and said, I'm tired. 5 minutes later, I saw her post a photo of her martini glass. Captioned, needed this. She wasn't alone. In the reflection of the glass, just barely, was the outline of someone. Tall, blurred, but there. I didn't say anything. Not yet. There were so many moments like that. Tiny things that wouldn't hold up in court, but they built a case all the same. The way she'd lock her phone the second I walked into the room. How she'd switch tabs on her laptop. Her sudden interest in yoga classes on Sundays, when she used to sleep in. Always at the same time. Always unreachable. Once I asked if she wanted to plan a weekend trip. Just the two of us. She paused, then said, Let's talk about it later. Things are crazy at work. Later never came. It got to the point where I was keeping a mental ledger. Each excuse, each inconsistency, each time she said she was at work and wasn't. I didn't want to live like that. Suspicious, bitter, cold. But what choice did I have? You don't wake up one day and stop trusting someone. It erodes. Quietly, I started sleeping less. Started waking up in the middle of the night and just staring at the ceiling, wondering when it all started slipping. Wondering if I'd been blind or if she'd just been that good at hiding it. Wondering if it was someone else, if it was Tom. If it had been him this whole time. Once, I walked into the bathroom and saw her phone lighting up on the counter. A message preview. Just a name, Tom. No text. Just his name. She picked it up before I could read anything and smiled. Work stuff. Always work stuff. I don't remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. Not just off wrong. But it was somewhere in the haze of all those little lies. Somewhere between the locked phone and the lipstick she didn't wear for me. Somewhere in the growing silence between us. Where love used to be. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to be crazy. I wanted this to be a phase. A weird, messy phase that we'd look back on someday and laugh about. But deep down, I knew. I was alone in this marriage. And the worst part? I had no idea what to do about it. There's something about seeing it with your own eyes that changes everything. You can second-guess a screensh *T. You can rationalize a vague text or a phone turned face down. You can convince yourself you're just being paranoid, insecure, dramatic. But when you see it, no room left for doubt. Something inside you breaks. Quietly. Permanently. It was a Wednesday night. I'd stayed late at the gym trying to clear my head. I didn't even want to work out. I just couldn't stand being in the house. The silence there had started to feel hostile, like it pressed against your skin. I used to come home to Melissa with a sense of comfort. Now I came home to tension I could feel in the floorboards. After my workout, I took the long way back, down by the Riverwalk, then through the little strip of cafes and bars we used to visit when we were still us. I wasn't looking for anything, just *ling time. Trying to stay away for a little longer. Then I saw her. It was a small wine bar tucked into the corner of the plaza. Dim lighting. Jazz playing. The kind of place that made you lean in to hear each other speak. And there she was, Melissa, her back to the street, head tilted, laughing. She looked alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. Light in the eyes, hair down, elbows on the table, flushed cheeks. Across from her, unmistakably, was Tom. His hand rested on the stem of a wine glass. Their knees were touching under the table, not by accident. She was leaning forward, smiling in that way you do when you're lost in someone. Her hand went to his arm at one point, soft and familiar. Like this wasn't new. Like this had rhythm. I didn't move. I didn't barge in. Didn't yell. Didn't give them the scene I was expected to deliver. I just stood there, a few feet from the window, frozen in the moment that changed everything. She told me she was working late that night. I turned and walked away. I didn't know where I was going. I just moved. My feet carried me down side streets, through parking lots, past closed bookstores and flickering streetlights. My hands were in my pockets, fists clenched. Not with rage, with something else, something worse. Clarity. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Melissa. Still at the office. It's taking longer than I thought. Love you. She had no idea I'd seen her. That I'd watched her, smiling at another man like she used to smile at me. That I'd seen her knees tucked against his like they were sharing a secret only they understood. I didn't reply. When I got home, the house was quiet. Melissa wouldn't be back for another hour, maybe two. I went upstairs to shower, stood under the water until it ran cold, trying to wash off the truth I couldn't unsee. When I climbed into bed, her side was untouched. The pillow still fluffed, but there, just barely visible in the soft light of the bedside lamp, was a smudge of lipstick. A different color. A deep rose shade I'd never seen her wear. Melissa always went with neutral tones, barely their nudes, soft pinks. But this was bold. Confident. Like someone trying to make an impression. When she finally came in, she tiptoed through the room like she didn't want to wake me. She slid under the covers, facing the other way. I lay still, eyes open, heartbeat in my throat. She smelled like wine and something sweet. Not her usual scent. Someone else's cologne, maybe? I couldn't tell. I didn't want to know. She didn't say goodnight. Neither did I. The next morning I woke before she did. I stood there for a while, just watching her sleep. She looked peaceful. Untouched by guilt. Or maybe just good at hiding it. That's the thing with Melissa, she could always compartmentalize. She had a talent for folding truth into tiny boxes and tucking them away. She stirred as I moved toward the door. You up early? She mumbled, eyes still shut. Yeah. Couldn't sleep. You okay? Yeah, I lied. Just restless. I spent that day in a fog. I don't even remember what I did at work. Meetings came and went, emails got sent, but I was somewhere else. Stuck in that bar window, watching her laugh, watching her pretend. That night, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car for almost an hour, parked in an empty grocery lot, just staring at the steering wheel. Wondering how we got here. Wondering what version of me she thought she was coming home to. By the time I walked in, Melissa was already in her usual spot on the couch. Netflix playing. Blanket over her lap. Phone in hand. Hey, she said, glancing up. You okay? Fine, I said, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door. Want to watch something? I shook my head. I'm gonna take a shower. Everything all right? Yeah. That was the rhythm now. Conversations made of one-word answers and hollow questions. I used to crave her voice. Now I could barely stand the sound of it. In the shower, I stared at the tiled wall and said it out loud for the first time, she's cheating. Just the words. No emotion. No drama. Just facts. She's cheating. And I'm still here. That realization hit harder than anything else. Not just that she was lying, but that I was letting her. Why? Because I was scared? Because I didn't want to start over? Because some part of me still clung to the version of us that existed before things got like this? I dried off, pulled on sweatpants, and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked tired. Older. Like I'd aged a decade in a week. When I came back into the room, Melissa was asleep. Or pretending to be. Her phone was clutched in her hand, screen dim. I didn't try to read it. I didn't want to. Instead, I laid there in silence, the ceiling fan clicking above, my heart too loud in the quiet. I kept thinking about how easy it is to pretend. To smile. To kiss someone good morning and tell them you love them even when your heart's already somewhere else. To laugh in a bar with another man while your husband walks past the window and everything inside him shatters. She'd done it so easily. And I let her. Not anymore. There's a strange kind of numb that sets in once you stop denying the truth. It's not peace. Not clarity. It's more like being underwater, like you're watching your life through thick glass, hearing everything muffled, moving slow. Every smile, every word, every touch starts to feel performative. And eventually, you get good at performing too. That week after I saw Melissa with Tom, I became an actor in my own life. Wake up. Say good morning. Make coffee. Go to work. Come home. Nod at her jokes. Pretend to fall asleep beside her. I said all the right things and avoided the ones that would tear it all apart. I was buying time for what I wasn't sure. Courage? Proof? An exit plan? Then came Friday. Melissa told me earlier in the week that she'd invited people over. Just a small get-together, she said. Nothing fancy. Zach and his girlfriend, a couple of her coworkers, are neighbors from down the street. I almost told her no. I almost said I wasn't in the mood to play host. But some part of me wanted to see her like that, to watch how she behaved in front of others. Whether the cracks would show. I cleaned the house like a robot, vacuumed carpets I didn't care about, arranged snacks I had no appetite for. Melissa flitted around like nothing was wrong, lighting candles, fluffing throw pillows, humming to herself while she arranged a charcuterie board like a Pinterest mom. She was good at this. The mask. The stage. Our guests arrived around 7. Zach came first, giving me that same long look he'd given me at the cookout weeks ago. I didn't say anything. Just gave him a beer and clinked bottles. Then came Melissa's coworkers, including Tom. Of course. He walked in like he owned the place, with that same smug grin, complimented the wine selection, and said something to Melissa that made her laugh just a little too loud. I watched them. Closely. Every glance, every casual touch to the arm, every time they leaned into each other to whisper about that nightmare of a client. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they just didn't want to. People are good at ignoring the obvious when it's uncomfortable. I barely spoke all night. Smiled when I had to. Nodded when someone asked me about work. But mostly I watched. Observed. Took mental notes. I was past the point of jealousy. What I felt was closer to disgust, not just at them, but at myself, for still being here. For still playing along. And then, near the end of the night, it happened. We were all sitting around the dining table, drinks half finished, conversation winding down, everyone in that loose, hazy state you reach after too much wine and just enough comfort. Melissa stood up, glass in hand, a little flushed. "I just want to say," she began, laughing like she was making a toast, "that I'm really glad we're all here tonight. It's been a crazy few months, and honestly, I wouldn't have made it without all of you." Everyone raised their glasses. Cheers. Smiles. Clinks. Then she turned to me. And I swear to God, her expression shifted. "And this guy," she said, gesturing toward me, "I know I give him a hard time, but he's a good one. A little passive sometimes, maybe, but who isn't?" A few chuckles around the room. Mine not included. "I just wish," she continued, I still locked on mine, "that he'd show up more. You know? Like emotionally. Like, be all in. Or maybe," she laughed again, "file for divorce already and get it over with." The room went dead silent. No one moved. Not a single breath. Zach's girlfriend blinked hard. Tom looked away. I stared at Melissa. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Just tired. And then I said it. "Do what you think is best." That's it. No yelling. No big revelation. Just 6 words that dropped like a hammer in the middle of our wine-stained table. Melissa's smile faltered. "Babe, I'm kidding," she said quickly. "Jesus. Lighten up." But no one laughed. The air was gone. She looked around, tried to backpedal, to wave it off like some edgy joke, but the damage was done. The truth had slipped out from behind her teeth, and there was no stuffing it back in. One by one, our guests began to excuse themselves. Zach was the first. He clapped me on the back on the way out. Didn't say a word. Just squeezed my shoulder. Tom left without a glance. Melissa didn't even walk him to the door. When the last guest was gone, she turned to me, arms folded. "What the hell was that? What was that?" I repeated. "I was going to ask you the same thing." "You embarrassed me," she said. "In front of everyone." "No," I said. "You did that all by yourself." She opened her mouth, then closed it. And for the first time in a long time, she had no comeback. She stormed off toward the bedroom, muttering something under her breath. I heard the door slam. A minute later, silence. I stayed in the living room. I didn't clean up the glasses. Didn't blow out the candles. I just sat there on the edge of the couch, staring at the empty hallway. And I felt it, not pain, not anger. Relief. Because in that moment, I knew I was done trying to fix something that only I was holding together. I was done swallowing her half-truths and gaslighting myself into silence. I was done performing. I slept in the guest room that night. First time since we'd bought the house. Mattress was too firm. Blanket smelled like detergent. The overhead light buzzed when I turned it off. And yet, I slept better than I had in months. I didn't dream. I didn't toss. I just closed my eyes and drifted. And for the first time, I felt no regret. The next morning, I didn't wait for her to say anything. I woke up before the sun, packed a small bag, just the basics, clothes, charger, my worn copy of East of Eden. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam any doors. I just walked out with the quiet conviction of someone who's finally made a decision. A real one. Melissa was still in bed. Or pretending to be. I didn't check. I drove east without a destination, the kind of drive you take when the only thing you know is you can't stay. By mid-morning, I found myself pulling into my brother's place in Astoria, small beach town, gray skies, the kind of air that smells like salt and second chances. "Didn't know you were coming," Aaron said when he opened the door, I still half asleep. "I didn't either," I said. He didn't ask questions. Just stepped aside and patted my shoulder once as I passed. That's the thing about brothers. They don't need the full story. They just know when you've been gutted and need a place to breathe. The first day, I didn't say much. Sat on the deck with a cup of black coffee, staring out at the ocean like it owed me answers. Aaron went to work and left me the house key. No pressure. No small talk. Just silence, and for once, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like space. I turned off my phone around noon. Couldn't stand the thought of seeing her name pop up. Couldn't handle the "what are you doing?" or "can we talk?" or "where are you?" I needed the world to go quiet, and for once it listened. I spent the second day walking the beach. Didn't bring headphones. Didn't bring a book. Just walked. The tide came in. The tide went out. And I started to realize how heavy I'd been carrying the last few months, like I'd been clenching every muscle in my body without realizing it. Now that I'd stopped, I felt it all. The third day, I cried. Not a loud, dramatic breakdown, just sat in the living room as the light changed and let the tears come. They didn't ask permission. They didn't apologize. They just happened. That was the worst day. But also the best. Because that's when it hit me, really hit me, that I wasn't going back to the life I had before. Not the marriage. Not the pretending. Not the version of myself that kept swallowing pain just to keep peace. I was done living in the margins of my own story. On the fourth morning, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of messages poured in. Melissa, of course. But also mutual friends. A few coworkers. Even Zach had texted. Whatever happened last night, proud of you. I opened Melissa's messages one by one. The first was simple. Where are you? Then. You can't just disappear like this. And later. I'm sorry. Just call me. Then came the wall of texts. Paragraphs. Apologies. Anger. Desperation. Her language bounced between love and guilt like she was throwing darts in the dark, hoping something would land. Photos of us from happier times. Voice memos I didn't play. At one point, she texted. You're destroying everything. Please. Just talk to me. I didn't reply. I spent another day at Aaron's. Told him a little more over dinner, just the outlines. He nodded, listening. At one point he said, you stayed longer than most would have. That stayed with me. Sunday morning I drove back. 4 hours on the highway, hands steady on the wheel. The sun was out, offensively bright. But I didn't feel heavy this time. I felt clean. When I pulled into our driveway, the house looked smaller. Or maybe I was just seeing it for what it was, not a home anymore. Just a shell filled with unsaid things. Melissa was waiting inside. She was sitting on the edge of the couch in the same hoodie she wore when we first moved in. No makeup. No act. Just her. She looked up when I walked in, eyes wide like she wasn't sure if I was a ghost. You're back, she said softly. I told you I would be. She stood, arms crossed like she didn't know whether to hug me or brace for impact. I was losing my mind, she said. You turned your phone off. No one knew where you were. You can't just do that. I needed space. You could have told me. I tried, I said. You just weren't listening. Silence. Then finally, the thing I wasn't sure I'd ever hear her say. It wasn't just work with Tom. I said nothing. Just let her keep going. It didn't start that way. I swear. But after a while, I don't know. It got blurry. We talked a lot. Too much. Then drinks. Then one night it crossed a line. When? I asked. Give me something real. She hesitated. About a month ago. But it wasn't planned. Doesn't matter, I said. You still did it. She nodded slowly, tears starting to rise but held back. I was confused. Don't use that word. But I was. No, I said. You were dishonest. You were selfish. You were careless. Say that. She looked down. It wasn't love. It didn't mean anything. I didn't know how to tell you. I exhaled through my nose. Looked around the room we'd built together. The shelves we painted. The couch we chose. The framed photo of us in Vancouver still hanging above the TV. I'm seeing a lawyer, I said. Her head **T up. Wait, what? I'm not doing this anymore. But we can fix it. No, I said. You broke it. And I'm done gluing it back together just to watch it crack again. She walked toward me, arms out, maybe to touch my face, maybe to beg, but I stepped back. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel rage. Just emptiness. But the kind that makes room for something new. I left that evening. Took the rest of my things and drove back to the city. Melissa didn't follow. Didn't call. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe silence was the only answer left. When I came back to sign the first round of legal documents, Melissa was waiting on the porch. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone who'd been living in a house built from regrets. I just need 5 minutes, she said. I nodded but didn't speak. Inside, she sat at the edge of the couch like it was a stranger's home. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, she said. With Tom. I didn't plan it. I wasn't trying to replace you. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I didn't say a word to anyone when you left. Not even him. I just shut everything down. Because when you walked out, it hit me, I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it. I wanted to believe her. Maybe even a part of me did. But it didn't matter anymore. I gave everything I had to us, I said quietly. And when it got hard, you gave it to someone else. Tears welled in her eyes, but I'd seen them before. They didn't move me like they used to. I want to try, she whispered. Therapy, anything. Just don't let this be the end. But I had already crossed that line, the one where love turns into memory. I didn't need revenge or closure. I needed peace. I'm not angry, I said. I'm done. And this time I walked away for good. The apartment I moved into wasn't much, 1 bedroom, tall windows, no furniture except what I could carry. But it felt like mine. Quiet. Clean. Honest. For weeks I just existed. Took walks. Cooked simple meals. Sat with the silence Melissa used to fill. And it didn't feel empty. It felt open. Then Zach invited me to dinner at his sister's place. I almost said no, but something in me said go. That's where I met Jane. No grand fireworks, no awkward flirting. Just two people talking like old friends. Calm. Easy. Real. We talked about books, music, how we both liked grocery shopping early in the morning when no one else was around. We never once mentioned our pasts. I laughed that night, really laughed, and realized how long it had been. Melissa's betrayal had shattered the life I knew. But maybe it needed to be broken. Because what came after wasn't just survival. It was me. Choosing me.